Today I'm going to give you a talk about Project Smooth, a streamlined software delivery initiative. This project explains the adoption of DevOps in the company that I work in, and the way this talk will go would be following the J-curve of transformation from a full stack enterprise release to how Coyote progressed towards a no-touch small frequent deployments. We're going to put emphasis on three main things: how change management has been incorporated in the CICD pipeline, how software development lifecycle processes drive auto-approved no-touch releases without the need for manual intervention downstream, and number three, a little bit of touching on the organizational and cultural changes that Coyote had to make for this DevOps adoption journey. Towards the end of the session, you're going to learn how Project Smooth increased the number of deployments, reduced the time to deliver a feature, and facilitated reduction in approval processes via the release gates, aka change management, right? So I'm Sonali Shrivastava. I am in the software industry for the last 13 years. I have worked both on software development and software delivery. I've been in Coyote for the last 10 years. I started as a developer, moved to team leadership, moved to managing software development for a monolithic application, then moving on to the biggest challenge I could get, which was to progress on the adoption of DevOps for Coyote. Coyote Logistics is a third-party brokerage company. What a 3PL does is it's an organization that uses third-party businesses to outsource elements of its distribution, fulfillment, and warehousing. So in our case, we don't own any carriers or shippers, but we have a network of 70,000 carriers, 14,000 shippers, but we have the best freight management transportation software that you can get in this whole wide world, and which is helping us move around 10,000 loads per day. So in today's talk, I'm going to tell you the story of Brad, a normal guy that moved from software development to software delivery, and the challenges he had to undergo in order to make deployments processes smooth and seamless while managing the demands of digitization of the application platforms and the decomposition of the monolith into microservices. So Brad, who was now responsible for managing full stack enterprise releases with the aid of emails, chat clients, people stopping by his desk with a million of manual repetitive tasks, like I mentioned, gets the best opportunity he can, which was to make all of that smooth and seamless and fast. So challenge number one for Brad, enterprise full stack deployments. Back then, enterprise full stack deployments would be conducted twice a month with an average turnaround time of 6 to 8 hours. More than 40 people staying for the night of the release, with around 2 weeks of testing cycle. How many of you have experienced this kind of environment? We have all been through it, right? Challenge number two versus Brad, reliance on manual testing and coordination. With the enterprise deployments and monolithic decomposition into microservices, each of them had 100% dependency on manual regression testing. Test execution time post-release would take longer than 2 hours. And with a dependency on a heterogeneous set of communication tools, like I mentioned, like email, chat client 1, chat client 2, millions of handoffs. How many of you have experienced that challenge? Challenge number three, many companies, when they are established for years and years, they start with a monolithic application because Coyote, being a 12-year, 14-year-old company, had started with the technologies which were available back then, right? So you really get to a point when you are a mid-sized company and you're in a very regulated environment. But compliance is not an afterthought. Compliance is not a second-class citizen, and that often leads to impeding the progress in adoption of DevOps when you are decomposing your application. So how many of you are developers in this room? How many times when you are building an application pipeline do you actually think about compliance? Really? I don't believe you. I mean, I am a developer for 12 years. I was so scared to work with compliance. They were lawyers in IT. I would just stay away from them. But the side effect of that is compliance is always an afterthought in that case. It's always thought about towards the very end, which is where gatekeeping and manual approval process all comes in the way, right? So that's the challenge number 3 for Brad. So any guesses on Brad's scorecard knowing these 3 challenges in software delivery performance? Not good. Brad was a low performer in software delivery. Well, I don't really agree with that emoji because there's nothing to be shy about being a low performer. It means you have done your due diligence in understanding and gaining expertise over how you actually evaluate your performance. How did Brad understand why Coyote and him were not elite, right? So while the performance was low, the opportunity was all shiny, and but it depends on how a company progresses towards the adoption, right? So a little bit touching on DORA. How many of you by now on day 2 of the conference do not know what DORA is? All right, easy for me. DORA, which is DevOps Research and Assessment, gives you the most comprehensive survey with around 30,000 professionals for how you benchmark your company in the software delivery performance, right? So there are 4 tiers, like I hope all of you know by now: elite, high, medium, and low. And if your company starts evaluating based on the different aspects of software delivery, like deployment frequency, how often does your organization deploy your code? Lead time for changes, how long does it take to go from code commit to code successfully running in production? At least start measuring how much it takes to restore a service in the event that a major incident occurs. Do you even have a cadence that you can, with a tool that you can measure the change failure rate? So these are the things that Brad educated himself to know that he was low, right? Now, knowing these 3 challenges to progress towards the adoption of DevOps for his company, there is always one goal. There is always one vision that company or any initiative should be revolving around, right? So what was that one big goal for Brad? Improvements for time to delivery, right? The moment he did all his study, he started promoting that, yes, Coyote wants to improve the time to delivery for its software systems. Immediately, it got executives super excited, and they started putting him a goal on Brad, which was, can you cut it down by 75%? Well, the question is, how did you even measure when you had emails or chats or million different heterogeneous way of calculating? But that's what executives do. And they trust you, they put the right people in the right place, and they just believe in you. So to cut down the time to delivery down by 75%, it was very necessary to build a stable compliance CICD pipeline for the monolithic decomposition that was happening back then for building microservices, and to get Coyote to elite performer. So these were the challenges. This was the core focus that Brad's life was revolving around, right? I'm sure many of you can connect to these challenges. So touching a little bit on how did Brad really do it, right? So there were multiple ways to go about this initiative. One way was to build a random series of projects with random IDs in a record locator, like QuickBase or ServiceNow, or you name it, and have it lost in the pile of million projects which are around business commitments for a company, right? Another way would be, use a couple of dev teams, get their commitment on some of their time to build a CICD model. But again, when you're in a business-driven company, it's always hard to progress on these type of initiatives. It takes, these initiatives can be taken as technical debt, right? So how did Brad really do it? Brad started very strong by branding the adoption of DevOps as Project Smooth. He totally did not steal the brand icon from Visual Studio. He totally did not read the book, Phoenix Project. But, you get the point that it needs a very strong push when you're in a business-driven company by explaining software delivery performance, by explaining how you excel at it, by getting commitment from our business stakeholders. So that was the start for Project Smooth. It required a lot of efforts around advocacy and education, educating people about, the different measures and metrics, figuring out ways to how to socialize the idea for adoption of DevOps. Brad started, channels in their chat bots like Slack or HipChat or you name it. These channels were to welcome ideas from software development or from all of IT. If you have an idea you want to submit that would help Coyote progress towards Elite, please do it. We are going to review the ideas in our weekly cadence. A generic backlog was set up within the work management tool. So a lot of effort and investment was made around marketing, education, advocacy. That was the start for Project Smooth. So a little bit touching on monolithic application. What's the beauty of a monolithic application? I'm sure someone will get offended by calling monolithic application and the beauty around it. You can do 200 things at one time, right? You can have a stack of 200 applications going out on one time. What is the flaw with that? If you build a CICD model around a monolithic application, while you can build it, it may take days and weeks to execute. It won't get you towards time to delivery improvements, right? What is the beauty of building a domain service? What is the beauty of decomposing a monolithic application? That you can do one thing 200 times a day, right? You build a service which is easy to deploy, which is less prone to bugs, and you can do it millions of times a day if you have a robust architecture and infrastructure around it, right? So remember how I mentioned that there was no easy way to measure how much time it was taking for a microservice to get deployed. While there were some ways to measure enterprise releases, but there was no easy way for that. So Brad started with a simple ticketing system to consolidate millions of heterogeneous requests inbound to his release management team, to his release engineering team. So the ticket would be, the request for developers would be when you are completing a feature, you submit this ticket with your feature request, with your contingency plan, with the packages that need deployment, while knowing that everything would go manually. So this ticket provided some sort of queuing mechanism, right, for deployments. So yeah, people at least know that they're in the line and their emails are not getting lost in the pile. But the big picture goal was to conduct releasing that domain service no-touch by building a no-touch deployment pipeline. So Brad started with a ticket so he can start measuring the time to delivery. He found out that executives' best feeling, gut feel was right. It was taking longer than a day to deploy a microservice. The goal was to set them all free, right? To get to one thing 200 times a day. So when you think about, I would like to put an emphasis on when a mid-sized company with, a big monolithic application progress towards building a continuous delivery model, it always comes with a balancing act. The balancing act for while you are decomposing your monolith into microservices and building a robust CI/CD pipeline for that, how are you doing on enterprise full stack? Are you simplifying it? Are you making it easy? Are you bringing back the work-life balance for the people who are non-stop conducting millions of tasks around it? So time to delivery to cut down the our turnaround time by 75% was applicable to both. Cut down for enterprise releases, build a CICD model with automated deployments, and cut that down by 75% as well. So what comes on the way when you think about no-touch deployment pipeline? What does this symbol stand for? The lawyers in IT. Right. Compliance comes on the way. I mean, like, in my company, we have an open desk environment, and they literally sit like, 3 rows away from me, and I'd never want to go to their area. But when I started working with them, when Brad's team started working with them, we, all realized that they're not that hard. They just speak different languages, and you just need to figure out a way to change the culture where you both build trust and sharing, and you prove things out to them, right? So, but what really comes on the way when you are moving towards the no-touch deployment pipeline is compliance. What is the other thing that comes on its way? Misalignment. If you want to improve your time to delivery for all of IT, so from the point a developer builds a brand new service to the time the service gets to the CI, to the time the service requires provisioning of hardware, if teams are not aligned, if they're not working towards one common goal, these things come on its way. So Brad started evaluating how to fix the problems around the cross-functional space, right? While keeping in mind that the requirements for compliance had to be met. So it's very important to think about how people are grouped, how they are grouped by geography, how they're grouped by application, whether they're grouped by component, how groups are linked. Do they have a common management tool where things are tracked, where you know that you can hopefully eventually get to cutting those handoffs, right? Whether those groups are aligned. Do they have a common objective? Do they have a good prioritization of work? And is the way we are organized working? Do you have standards like around metrics and objective key results, OKRs, so you can align the group by telling the common vision? So cross-functional space becomes a very big problem with adoption of DevOps, right? So Brad started laying out all the different roles in IT department which are responsible for how you deliver your software, right? And as you can see, these are pretty much everyone in IT, right? Now, if you think about a service with a turnaround time of 2 weeks to get out to production, I would bet that majority of the time for those 2-week span is in the handoffs. A task may be sitting in a network engineer's plate for 6 days, after which someone would nag and ask him to do the work, and then it will just get done in a matter of 1 hour. How long does it take to create a virtual IP? Probably not more than 1 hour, right? So it was very important for some sort of organic advocacy by doing team building, knowledge sharing, lunch and learns, skunk works. Anyone know what that means? Doing unofficial projects, trying to get some things to show to people that there is going to be a good return on investment if you take this path. So we spent a lot of time and energy. Brad spent a lot of time and energy on building organic advocacy for the adoption of DevOps within these verticals so that the handoffs can be reduced. Now, the answer to all of that is build a good orchestration model. Every department can conduct their own process automation, right? A network engineering group can use Ansible for automating their whips or DNS creation. A server team can use secret server for maintaining their service accounts. So they have their own tools and their own mechanisms, but getting them all to align takes a lot of education. A network engineer may not know why a developer creates custom APIs. They may have a psychological safety that if I give my API on top of which a developer would build a custom API, he may be taking over my work, right? So you got to explain to each other. And that was a big cultural change that Brad had to work on to progress towards it. Now, compliance, the scary part, always comes on the way, right? So you know how Brad mentioned towards the beginning of his story that the goal for monolithic decomposition is to move from doing 200 things at one time to one thing 200 times, right? Now, the same mantra is not applicable to compliance. Just because you're decomposing your microservices from a monolith, you don't multiply the number of change requests by 200 times. You can start at there because there are so many million things to do with the adoption of DevOps. You just need to prioritize, but over the course of time, it needs to change. You can start with simple mechanisms with approvals from your chatbots for the functional managers and the CAP committee. So even though they have sporadicity to receive those approvals 200 times a day, it's still like giving them some space, but while still not solving the problem in the right ways, right? So there is a mantra that I learned from my compliance manager that you do what you say, which is you document your process, and you say what you do, which is you follow the process and show evidences about it, and you prove it. If you follow this simple mantra, life would become so easy for changing the way change management is thought about in any company. So compliance in CICD has three things, right? One is separation of duties and workflows. Other is documentation of change evidence. And third is periodic reviews of workflow. So how many of you have change management of some kind in your company? Why might you want change management? Because business has regulations, right? If you can investigate and learn more about these three core concepts around compliance and then try to research outside what are the different frameworks available. So after Brad freaked out thinking how we are even going to get here, he found out that someone out there had already done it. So the framework that Brad consumed to build change management controls in the software development lifecycle process was ISECA. ISECA stands for Information Security and Information Assurance. So really what Brad's team, which was a group of developers and compliance, started working together on is learning ISECA and mapping the 15 or 16, whatever that number was, change management controls with parts in the software development lifecycle. So I'll tell a few examples of how Brad was able to accomplish the change management. So in the CICD pipeline. So for instance, when a new project starts in a dev team, it starts with planning the project, creating a technical design document. After that, the business analyst would build the work item and with an acceptance criteria, which is agreed upon with the QA person, the quality assurance tester, so that you ensure that given this is the acceptance criteria, there is a test around it. Now, the compliance change management policy that it mapped to was changes are documented prior to deployment with success criteria. Bingo. You got one change management control aligned to one part of your software development lifecycle. Moving on to pull requests. When a developer completes a piece of code, if you have policies in your tool around how many minimum code reviewers should be in reviewing that pull request, and you work with your compliance for the policy, which is there is an approval criteria for code to move to continuous integration pipeline. Bingo. You get that. Similarly, Brad kept evaluating how change management policies can be mapped to the continuous integration model, like, a build is, for instance, a build is successful when all unit tests pass, when there is a minimum code coverage for XYZ%, and whatnot. For continuous testing, do you have test libraries which are periodically reviewed? Would be one change management control. If you don't have it, work with the process owners and implement that for your organization. So really what this is saying is, instead of gatekeeping and having CAB towards the very end, which does not add any value, when they are very busy executives, and if they don't agree with a technical design and they want to reject what purpose it is adding. The design has already been implemented for 2 months, so you got to bake compliance all the way, right? So it's automated and audited. So Brad's mantra was, you be the auditor, not the one being audited, right? And in order to conduct process automation and zeroing handoffs, you organize people around work, not work around people. Don't worry about the hierarchy. Do self-forming teams. Bring a culture where people are willing to work together. So what did Brad accomplish from his journey? From small, frequent deployments world, around 2015, the initiative started to decompose a microservice. Then the decomposition kept happening. In the year of 2015, there were a lot of efforts around building a very robust continuous integration pipeline. Around 2018, the ticketing system was enabled, and for 6 to 7 months, it was measured for the turnaround times. Project Smooth started, which started automating parts of the deployment processes. It started with automating deployments to pre-production, moving on to building a continuous testing framework, moving on to building automated deployments to production, resulting into 61% reduction in deployment times. Remember the goal, 75. Not too bad, 61%. Brad's team was able to increase the number of production deployments by 150% and reducing the number of bugs post-release by 20%. So this was the small, frequent deployment world. Now, this was quantifiable, measurable, everything was present in the tools. How was the DORA State of DevOps report after that? We were able to conduct deployments between once per hour and once per month, which takes it to high medium. We were able to have a code commit to code successfully running in production between 1 week and 1 month. Time to restore was measurable. Initiatives were done to improve around it. So really, within the matter of 18 months, Brad was able to get Coyote from low to medium high performer in the adoption of DevOps, which is not bad, which gives a lot of hope and optimism, which is why Brad's story is worth telling here as well, right? So enterprise full stack deployments. Brad conducted a survey for all of IT with 1 million of different permutations of questions to understand how the simplification for enterprise release was going, whether people are still staying for 8 hours in the night or 40 people are staying for the night of the release. And he analyzed and realized that the time spent, happiness, execution, complexity, and testing were all improved. And it was around 70% of the time to delivery goal for enterprise as well. So like I mentioned, with continuous delivery adoption in a mid-sized company with a monolithic, you got to have the balance on both. You go up on microservices deployment, and you go keep simplifying enterprise, right? So what do we learn from Brad? That J-curve is real. Again, J-curve is in reference to DORA, and what it really means is challenge with continuous improvements is that it's unfortunately not linear. You may have quick wins in the beginning, but over time, the process may often regress. And the key to success is to have a simple scientific approach, which is you think about an idea, implement that small idea, get it out to production, measure it, and check if it's working. If it's not working, kill it. And there will be always different contextual challenges in the J-curve. But the key is, keep believing in yourself, keep knowing that, these things are normal, and keep looking back in time. And when Brad looked back in time, how things were 18 months ago, he really felt that the J-curve was real, right? So what is up next? Brad has a much more ambitious goal, which is to improve time to delivery by 150%. In order to get there, he's going to leverage ephemeral environments. and which is investing around cloud infrastructure and orchestration and well-defined monitoring solutions. So I hope this presentation was helpful. I hope it added some value. This is mostly catered towards companies which are starting with adoption of DevOps and giving them the confidence that we at Coyote did it, and we are going to continue our efforts, and we have been successful. You can take my picture for the LinkedIn and everything else on this slide, but thank you so much.
Challenges that are facing in an area. So one of the things that you mentioned in your report, or sorry, during your presentation was you were talking about surveying your employees and team members. Any advice on what you learned from that and that the other teams will be able to help from that?
So the question is, what did we learn about how to conduct successful surveys? I think it's really custom tailored to where your company is in the adoption of DevOps. What is the different skill sets that you are looking into? So for instance, for the enterprise survey, we sent the survey out to all of IT, which is pretty much every skill set. Because if you think about the number of resources who were sitting for the night of release, it was independent silos within IT. So my recommendation is, the more the merrier. I mean, if you think about DORA, it's the longest running report with around 30,000 people for the survey. So the more the merrier. If you feel that, your survey did not go well, you also know that you had hundreds of thousands of people invested in it, so something is actually wrong and you got to work on it, right?
Thank you. Actually, you gentlemen, if you would go ahead and step up on stage, we'll get your comments as well. But any thoughts on surveys or other approaches? Comments, sir?
I really like the presentation. Thank you. It looks so cool and motivating. But then I have this question, like how? I have this analogy, maybe it's too much, but imagine you go to coal mining town where everybody's life depends on coal, and you tell, guys, you're gonna build Teslas now. And then we have this presentation, like, wow, all these cool percentages. I think there should be like huge challenges. I can see development cost. I can see new hires, right? Because this work, like when you deploy Monolith, you just take a very simple VM and deploy. When you deploy microservices, Kubernetes, somebody needs to understand how this thing works, right? Or, I don't know, maybe Service Fabric, just because I'm from Microsoft. So yeah, I think there were more slides, but some of them were not like that positive and were removed, so I wonder what are those?
So one thing I would mention on that is, for me, the mantra I always like to use is don't let perfect get in the way of the possible. To me, it's important in these kind of presentations to show some negativity a little bit, because for everybody out there, right, it's going to be a bumpy road. It's not going to be perfect. You're going to have false starts. You're going to struggle, but that doesn't mean you can't make your life better today. And I mean, that's in the context of what you're saying there. I mean, I think it's important to know that you don't have to do it perfectly, right? But just to a certain extent, just start.
Okay. And it's definitely a culture shift. I'm not sure if you were going to say that, Chris, but there's definitely a culture shift that's going to come along with it. So just beginning to have an idea, presenting that idea, and that's where she came up with that logo. If you notice, Brad had that logo, and from the that Brad did not take from Visual Studio, but at least have that a logo and something that people can get behind, a vision of where they want to go with this. That's going to help drive it. You got to have something like an advocacy to drive that, and that's what Brad did.
So to kind of add on to that too is surveys as well. And so one, talking about negative, like what you said is negative and stuff like that. Think about us as developers and stuff like that. How many times you press Control-Shift-B or F5 and stuff like that, and you compile it, you're like, who cares? Because it catches us. We fail constantly. And you think about the principles behind cloud is that you're expecting failure and stuff like that. So it's not negative. It's saying that, okay, we actually were able to know where we failed. And that's one of the great things about working at Coyote, for example, is we have some metrics that we cannot break. We know how much money we need to make per minute and stuff like that. So our applications have to be based on that and not be detrimental and stuff. So as Rich was saying with culture of change and stuff, a lot of trust that came with it. And then I keep losing my train of thought, Dave, I'm sorry. But yeah, I'll stop talking.
I was going to say, are we about ready to move on to the next?
Actually, one final comment.
Oh, I just wanted to point out sort of from the monolith side of things, it can be a lot easier to sort of test and debug things, but everyone has to march at the speed of the slowest person, which can be really frustrating to teams that maybe have extra capacity, would like to move faster. And so one thing you can do is you can channel those teams' energy towards making some of these changes, with the carrot being that they'll get to move faster. And the teams that don't can stay in the monolith until they're ready to leave. And eventually you end up with a monolith that's the last team who wants a monolith. And, that's a microservice because there's only one team maintaining it. Last one up, please turn off the lights.
So what are some successes we've seen in the space?
Why not?
Actually,
I have, this is somewhat unrelated, but I wanted to come up and ask a question based on this observation that there's a ton of Coyote folks here, and I think that's amazing. Kudos for that. And
We roll in the pack.
I think it's fantastic. And so what it's kind of related to challenges and successes. What I would love to hear what the origins of that are. It seems like there was this positive attitude towards collecting data, this positive attitude towards branding and socializing the idea. A lot of good patterns that I'm observing. What do you think are the key pieces that have facilitated that? Is it a specific leader in the organization? Is it a general vibe? Is it something else? I'd love to hear about that.
Actually, hey.
So my personal opinion is it's a combination of all of those, and that's just, my personal opinion. I mean, if you notice, there are quite a few Coyotes up here, but we're from different parts of IT. But we all work together to get this accomplished.
So I'm going to, oh, sorry, Scott.
So my view of it was, I heard in another talk, it's once you get a taste of it, you can't look away, and there's a little bit of, some people just started doing it, even if it was only, to their dev and QA machines within their team. And that was, the foot in the door to prove that, hey, there's some value here. And before you know it, you got a line around the block of everybody saying, I want to get in on that. So, I mean, that's an aspect of it too as well, is even if it's only things that affect the way your team works internally, right? It's setting the example, showing people, seeing what you're doing. And then, as soon as they get the taste, right, the executives start saying, well, wait, maybe this team's working faster. Why, right?
I was going to add one thing. Okay, so if you notice, the people up here from Coyote are very outgoing and outspoken and stuff like that, and we're also very seasoned and have kind of dealt with a lot of the same pains. So having that positive attitude is actually very critical to our success as well. It's hey guys, look what I'm doing and stuff like that. Where it just be an evangelist. Richard's job is ridiculous. His job is developer advocate, which I can't believe is a real job, and he gets paid for. But it's good because what it does is our development teams, we have 30 development teams and stuff like that spread across the world. And they don't always know, because you're trying to keep up with what your products are, that we're constantly saying, hey, this is what we're doing here. And even my role is to basically to share that among the organization and stuff like that. Look, this is exciting. So that positive attitude has really been kind of what it is. And like Scott said, where we kind of went at skunkworks, if you will, is we just are so sick of dealing with this crap that we're going to do something just to help our own lives. So that's the best way.
I think one of the things I heard in the question, though, was what were the sources of information? What did you
where did you get your educational sources and things like that? Was it all homegrown, or were there certain sources that you used?
Yeah, and I think it kind of started from a top-down, and if you saw that time frame, like the decomposition of the monolith started a couple of years, before Project Smooth started. But that kind of kicked off the ideas from the top down, and that's where more of like the marketing and where we're coming up with Brad is from the top down. And I think it took a long time for that to happen. But then once they caught a wind of it, we marketed it, we got everybody on board, and then we were able to run with it.
Scott, did you have something then? I forgot what I was going to say.
I think the message that we are really wanting to put here is the initiative started in 2015 when we started decomposing our first monolith. We spent 1 full year building a robust, consistent, continuous integration pipeline. We educated ourselves. We got to stopping point where, because of misalignments, it was very hard to deploy aspects of continuous deployment. So for instance, release engineering group would uses Octopus for deployments in Coyote. Aspects of automation had to be done for Octopus. Aspects of automation for test frameworks had to be done, which is reporting to another QA person, right? So really the message we are saying is, it took us 3 years to get to actually start adoption of DevOps by branding something like Project Smooth. But you can shorten that cycle because that unknown is now known, right? So that's really the message that we want to convey here.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Just wanted to growth. So as Andrew said, that it was two-sided. One top-down is that they needed something to change. But then you look at like our staff, which is the people that solve the problem, that we were the ones that kind of, there's an organic like growth where we kind of came across the bottom saying, here's how we think we can solve it. They knew it is, and there's a partnership to say, hey, we need to be this like a first-class citizen with Coyote saying, let's brand this as something we're all behind, and it's something that's repeated in your head constantly, and that's why the marketing advocacy there. So.
And I had a different comment, but it was on the successes in the area. One thing I found very effective for handoffs is to require positive acknowledgement when you do need to hand something off. So instead of just sticking something in a ticket queue, you make sure that the person who gets that ticket, you like ping them on Slack or something, and you say, hey, you have the ticket that's blocking, this release or something like that. And until that person says, yes, I've got it, it's still your job to keep poking them until it happens. I found that cuts down handoff time by a lot over just whenever they pick up a ticket.
Excellent. So considering this kind of transformation story, in 2 to 5 years, what's a magical practice, or what do we need to be thinking about? What do we need to be working on so that we may wave a magic wand, 2 to 5 years, we don't have to worry about this anymore?
So I noticed one part of your story where you talked about getting everybody in the room, and I would like to see it be normalized that everybody's in the room when we talk about technical practices, because there's a lot of blind sides from each team about making sure we have the communication up and down, and there are things that developers can do that other teams may need, especially in test, to alleviate some of the pain that they're feeling. And there are things that test can do to try and alleviate things that are happening in dev. And that happens all across in database and IT, just in making sure that everybody's safe and able to move really, really fast and not blindsided by new changes.
Yeah, I can add to that. That actually was a pretty big challenge that we faced and something we had to put a lot of time into. And not only was it just figuring out where we're going forward, but a lot of it was just visibility into what we're doing now. Because like, I might think I know what you're doing, but do I really know what you're doing? And it's vice versa. So it took a lot of time to try to get a really good understanding of all these multiple teams we're working with, what everyone is truly doing, so we could all see the big picture. And I think that's really helped, because now when we go together to make those decisions, we're on the same page. And honestly, the last meetings we had, it was almost kind of felt like it was pointless, because we all already knew, but it took that period of time to get there. Yeah.
That's where I wanted to go, is like, how did you assign a value to everybody getting on the same page? Because often it's hard for you to go as a development team and say, hey, we want to move in this direction, or as a release engineering team to say, hey, this is a direction we want to move, and other teams to actually find value in that, especially given their existing things that they're working on, to say, hey, can you put that down for a minute, because we're really going to help us move a lot faster if we can coordinate.
I think it's okay for individual teams to conduct process automation in their own ways, as long as they're complying to measures and OKRs that your company is committing to, right? What is not okay is to misalign on that orchestration model, the integration points in your process. Like I mentioned during my talk, it may take just 5 minutes to to create a virtual IP. But the task is really sitting in the network engineer's plate for 7 days, maybe. So yeah, okay to conduct process automation in your own ways, but think about decisions when you need to, intervene, because the orchestration model is not going to fit their initiatives around automation.
All right, so to add that, all right, sorry, Dave. Oh, don't touch the mic. All right. So again, someone that's kind of newer on the Coyote side and what I saw, so there's a lot of aspects of it that made it successful. One is if you look at our physical layout of our office and about we're talking about communication and sharing ideas and stuff like that. So our office plan is completely open. It's one of those sexy, modern type offices with high walls and all that fun stuff. But because of that, and the way the teams are even laid out physically on the floor, you have no choice but hear conversations and stuff like that. So as a result, you may actually hear something and just go wander over, hey, what are you guys talking about? And so that has started to help with some of the adoption as well. It's just that social stuff that's kind of going around there. And the other part I'd say is that no one necessarily, it's not necessarily the top down of for me, I'm an enterprise architect, so you do whatever I tell you to do and stuff like that. In fact, I try to have as few ideas as possible. And I rely on everybody else to say, hey, what do you guys think to do that? And my talent happens to be that I'm manipulative. So I can go to my executives and be like, this is why you need to spend this money and stuff like that. Where let's say someone that's technical is trying to say, this is going to save me time, but the way that translates up to the executive isn't necessarily the same. So we've created, I say layers, but they're very transparent in the sense that I just have, my talent happens to be able to sell this a little bit higher. I understand the technical side and stuff like that, but I just don't want to develop it. But that's where we've developed those roles that.
Bottom-up advocacy versus
exactly.
top-down advocacy.
Right.
So it sounds like one magical practice is to make sure the conversation's happening all over the company all the time. Any other thoughts on magical practices that improve things?
Yeah, just one thing to kind of add to that. One of the biggest things that helped me in a lot of advocacy for a lot of this stuff was don't expect a decision the first time you talk about it, right? In fact, try not to get anybody to make a decision the first time you talk about it, right? Because people don't make decisions, and when you first present them with an idea, it was in another talk, right? We don't listen to facts, right? So it's, present an idea, let them go away and think about it 2 or 3 times even before you try to get a commitment or a decision on something, right? Plan an idea. Just a little bit of what he's talking about. Walk around planning ideas. Don't try to get people to do anything yet, right? And that's one way to kind of get a little bit of groundswell.
I would add it might help to have a couple of postmortems in your favor.
Okay, yes. The question was, what would you want to see in 2 to 5 years? And I saw mentioned ephemeral environments for every single stream. And I'm wondering if you have any ideas or plans how to handle the cross-service dependencies as you stand up those ephemeral environments. I've seen those Katmari more times than I really prefer to. And so if anyone has good patterns there, I'd love to hear them.
This is ephemeral environments is my fan. I love it. Dave, I've worked with him for years. He knows that this is my big, trying to do so. So like we did some really cool, and I'll show it to you afterwards. I'll show Dave this yesterday, like using Docker Compose and stuff like that. We're actually able to, like, there's some really kind of amazing things that we can do with like integration testing with external services. Like we have a Mongo dependency and a RabbitMQ on one. So we have to so we've done that where like we can do some of that service redirection, because in the past is like we deploy an ARM template out or something like that, which took some time to design, or Terraform, whatever you choose to use, and then do the configuration settings and stuff like that. But it still takes a lot of time and effort, and we all screw up config settings and stuff like that. So,
Yeah, speaking of time.
yeah, sorry, okay.
So actually,
But yes,
with
looking
that,
forward.
this is a great conversation. Thank you very much for the energy and the enthusiasm. Let's go ahead and give a final round of applause.